Hello EFD squad and welcome back to One-on-One, where we take you through things close to our heart in greater detail. This week I'll be exploring the possible ramifications that Brexit may have on the Premier League, and spoiler alert, they could be absolutely game-changing. So what is Brexit again? Right, let's backtrack briefly. It's June 2016. Drake's top of the charts with one dance, Roy Hodgson's England side haven't lost that tie against Iceland yet, and 51.9% of the UK public just voted to leave the EU, having been a member since 1973. Membership has provided many benefits since then, such as the right to live and work in other member states, you get access to free emergency healthcare should anything go Pete-tong on your jollies, and we share intelligence to combat nasty things such as terrorism. So why would we leave? Some of the pros being put forward by Brexiteers include stricter control of UK borders, reclaiming power from European courts for UK lawmakers, and a reluctance to stop contributing to a centralised money pot. At the moment, Britain contribute the second biggest amount after Germany. Apparently sharing isn't caring for this lot. Brexit's also coincided with things like the migrant crisis, the rise of right-wing nationalism across Europe, Islamophobia, and other social phenomena that make people's true motives really hard to decipher. However, today our focus is strictly business, and there's few bigger than the Premier League. So, how's Brexit affected the Premier League so far? The lasting implications depend on what version of Brexit the UK and Europe settle on, but there are some short-term effects that are easier to identify that have already happened. When the referendum results were announced, bookmakers Bwin estimated that the fall of the pound's valuation owing to all this political uncertainty cost Premier League clubs £317 million of transfer fees. That's roughly 35.2 odds and Edwards. Celtic's record signing. Yes, I did get them into a video again somehow. Basically, British clubs had to throw more money at their foreign counterparts to bridge the gap left by fluctuating exchange rates. Manchester City were hit particularly hard in this regard, with their signings costing an extra £38.5 million. Since then, Tottenham Hotspur manager Maurizio Pochettino has blamed the club's lack of summer transfer activity in 18-19 directly on Brexit, saying everything is now 30% more expensive. Market experts actually put it closer to 15%, but that's still pretty substantial in today's footballing landscape, especially when it comes to exporting players. Now the British public have opted for Brexit, European clubs are effectively getting student discount on Premier League signings. Take Felipe Coutinho, for example. Barcelona saved a whopping €20 million on him when they signed him from Liverpool. And at the top, every penny counts when it comes to meeting FFP requirements, unless, you know. What Brexit will look like on the 29th of March 2019 is still to be decided. 4 possible scenarios have developed and each mean very different things for the Premier League. Numero 1 is a no deal, and this is the worst case scenario. No one wants this. It means we haven't come to an agreement. It has hit the fan. In fact, it might leave us with food shortages, shortages in medical supplies. Basically, if your nan gets the flu. 2, a hard Brexit. This is what the hard-line Tories want, and it would have a big effect on the Premier League because it means an end to the freedom of movement, okay? Walls. Build that wall. No, don't. Silly, isn't it? Number 3 is a soft Brexit. A soft Brexit. And this would impact the Premier League in very minimal fashion because the freedom of movement would remain. So we could sign European wunderkids still and uncapped European stars. 4, the Chequers deal. This is Theresa May's vision of a post-Brexit UK, and basically she's cherry-picked what she wants. Europe aren't very happy with it. She's named it after her country estate. So, you know, I want to turn her estate into a big Nando's. Neither of them going to happen. Okay, so let's just discount number 4 for the time being. At the time of filming, we're still really no clearer as to what scenario is going to prevail. So as we navigate our way through the rest of this script, there's going to be a certain amount of speculation on things like the Premier League, the FA, transfers, work permits. But I've done my research, so we're going to have to do the best with what I've got, I'm afraid. Let's start with how the Premier League feel about all this. But before we move on, oh, my finger just appeared from nowhere, didn't it then? Jump cut. I want you to vote in the poll just above. Did that intro really help you understand the basics of Brexit? Are you well tooled to take on the rest of the video? Get voting, just there. A Premier up. In June 2016, all 20 Premier League clubs voted against Brexit. In fact, then Richard Scudamore, the chairman, said that it's an affront, the concept of Brexit that is, to the openness that is expressed in the Premier League. You know, love beyond borders. Or in business terms, we're really onto a good thing here, and this could really fudge things up. After all, this is a guy who secured himself a £5 million payout footed by Premier League clubs when he leaves at the end of 18-19. And if you think it's going to be the biggest teams that hit hardest, then think again. After the results of the referendum became clear, Mike Garlick, who's chairman of Burnley FC and nemesis of vampires everywhere, yes, my favourite joke that I've scripted in, told everyone that the equality gap in the Premier League would narrow, okay? It would get even more difficult for the smaller clubs to compete. We'll revisit this later, but it's important you heed Mike Garlick's words, okay? Conversely, the FA's stance, that's the Football Association, is very different. It would appear they see this as an opportunity to create more avenues for homegrown players, and this is reflected in their latest suggestion where they want a maximum of 12 foreign players in a 25-man Premier League squad. Their end goal is, of course, to strengthen the national side, which has its virtues, but at what cost to Premier League football clubs? If this ruling was applied now, teams like Manchester City, Watford, Tottenham and Brighton would all be screwed because they've got 17 foreign bodies in their team at current. Burnley, they'd be fine. Yeah, could have guessed, probably. The Premier League have pretty much come out all guns blazing. They want it to be at the opposite end of the spectrum. They want to be able to sign whoever they want, whenever they want, from wherever they want. Young kid from Argentina, yes please. Prodigious young talent from France, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Australia, probably not Australia, yes please. But they are willing to reserve 8 places for homegrown players in the process. So a little compromise might have to happen, and we'll come to that later. All this talk of squads leads us nicely to transfers, and this is where it gets bloody interesting. Transfers. At the time of writing, the Premier League contains the most foreign players in Europe's top 5 with 67%. In total, there's 65 different nations represented in the Premier League, with French and Spanish most common after the English. This is a stark contrast from the inaugural weekend of the Premier League in 1992, where only 13 foreign players lined up across 11 fixtures. 13. Lucky for some. So it would appear, at least in some degree, that the recruitment of foreign players has been key in terms of the Premier League going from that in 92 to financial top dogs now in 2018. In 2016-17, the average revenue for a Premier League club was a whopping €265 million. That's €110 million more than the next best league, which is the Bundesliga. You know, your average Joe in the Premier League is earning this much, your average Hans down here, and the rest of them. This means that even mid-table clubs can go balls to the walls for talented foreign acquisitions. I mean, look at Felipe Anderson at West Ham. Get out. Run. In fact, of the 298 players that were transferred into the Premier League in 17-18, just over a third were from the UK, and that includes youngsters with dual nationalities and loanees returning to their parent clubs. So how would Brexit affect this? And by this I of course mean acquiring these foreign players that fuel the competitiveness in the Premier League that it's become renowned for. Point 1, work permits denied. So, as we established before, a ban on the free movement of people would make it much harder to get work permits for players to get into this country. Players of European descent would be treated in the same way as non-EU nationals. This is problematic as access to the UK for these non-European players is subject to a bunch of red tape and ultimately can be boiled down to performance and involvement at international level. Whereas EU players at the minute aged 16 and above can come and go as they please as we're still part of the European Union. In fact, in 2016, the BBC established that 332 players from across the Premier League, the Scottish Premier League and the Championship wouldn't have cut the mustard. They would not have got past that red tape had the same rulings applied to them as non-EU nationals when they join their respective teams. This is a good representation of how much clubs would have to change in terms of their recruitment across the UK should these rulings come in post-Brexit. So how do non-EU players get work permits? The long and short is they need an endorsement from the Football Association, and the way that normally comes about is performance at international level. If you play for a team that FIFA ranks from 1 to 10, then you must have played in at least 30% of competitive fixtures over the last 2 years. Below that, the amount actually increases. This is almost like a quality control system, but they're pretty punchy. If these rulings had applied to Kante when Leicester went in for him, when he was a more obscure name, no international caps, then he'd never have come to these shores, and that'd be sad because bloody brilliant, isn't he? This upward trend continues the worse your international team gets, basically. Do you think this is a fair system? Let me know in the poll just above. The Premier League does not like this at all. They have voiced their concerns that it may lead to a lack of star quality. For example, Anthony Martial and David De Gea both wouldn't have been able to sign for Manchester United as they were uncapped at the time. Well, I'm guessing, Martial probably take that now, so get me out of here. It would have also prevented Dimitri Payet lighting up the Premier League in claret and blue and blocked the record signing of Alexandre Lacazette for Arsenal. Delving even further back, someone like Thierry Henry wouldn't have been able to play in British shores as he didn't have the required amount of caps at the time. He wasn't a bona fide international, was coming off a bad spell in Italy, so probably wouldn't have been given special dispensation. Can you imagine the Premier League without Thierry Henry? The only way to get around this really is to appeal to an exceptions panel who take things like salary, transfer fee and involvement in European competitions like the Champions League into consideration, and you might get in the back door that way, but still, Strugsville. To wrap this up, let's get a summary from Tiran Gunwardina, a specialist in sports law. To get an automatic permit, you need to satisfy a number of international appearances in the last year. If they extend that to EU players, they'll have to take the best 10 to 12 players from each country as they'll satisfy the criteria automatically. Point number 2, wave goodbye to the youth. At the moment, UK sides enjoy easy access to European players aged 16 to 18 because of EU law. However, without membership, which we of course are getting rid of, it makes it much harder. We have to wait until they're not considered minors, which is aged 18, before we can sign them. If this very important bit of legislation that's on screen right now through the magic of editing did not exist, then we wouldn't have seen Cristiano Ronaldo at Manchester United or Cesc Fabregas at Arsenal. Although here the FA may weigh in and say, well, look at the calibre of player we've got waiting to break through into Premier League sides. We've got under 17 winning sides at international level, under 20 sides that have won big trophies at international level. So these sort of kids are knocking on the door. Where are their positions? Conversely though, what about British kids that are gaining valuable experience abroad? How does this affect them? Jadon Sancho, no more. No.
Get on with it.
Well. Many top European leagues have eligibility laws when it comes to foreign players. Spain and France, for example, operate a hard cap system. Spain, you're only allowed 3 foreign players. France, you're allowed 4. It's understood these European laws haven't said they'll change their rulings to accommodate British players when Brexit happens. You've made your bed, now lie in it. If we were already out of Europe, for example, this would have denied youngsters like Jadon Sancho their move, and whilst he's been at Dortmund, he's gained recognition and put in the performances that have propelled him to international level. They wouldn't have been able to sign him, of course, because he's 16. They would have had to wait till he was 18, and then fine. Let's move on to our penultimate section, which is match day squads. Champions League and Europa League regulations demand that a matchday squad must contain at least 8 homegrown players. What is a homegrown or club-trained player, I hear you cry? Well, Zach should be putting it on screen right now, so you have a little read. I'll just chill. It's rubbed my jeans, which are ribbed, by the way. Just rubbed my leg. Now, one example of a top club using this to their advantage is Arsenal and Hector Bellerin. They snapped him up when he was 16, and by the time he was 19, he counted as a homegrown player. The benefits there are pretty clear to see. So, top clubs can go and scour Europe, find the best talented youngsters, acquire them age 16, and by the age of 19, if they're fully assimilated, then bang, homegrown, and they can sign another foreign player who can take that position as a foreigner in that team. So it's all about talent pools, I guess. In the post-Brexit Premier League, Arsenal would have had to wait until Hector Bellerin turned 18 before snapping him up. In the meantime, Barcelona may have realised we've got a player on our hands here and tied him down to a long-term option. Or other European clubs probably would have realised he's also a talent, sounded him out quicker and hoovered him up. As a result, British clubs will probably have to place more emphasis on bringing young talent through or snapping up other talent in their domestic pool. So bringing that talent up for the Championship. Maybe Mason Mount gets more of a game. Maybe Ola Aina doesn't go on loan to Torino. Maybe Jonathan Panzo doesn't have to leave Chelsea to go to Monaco. Maybe Hudson-Odoi gets a game. God, he's a don. Love him. So good. So good. So to conclude, things pretty much still in the air. Politicians spinning a lot of plates right now. No one's satisfied with any scenario that is currently being presented, basically. So, you know, a bit of a storm. However, things might be clearer by March next year, and by the start of next season, these rules, these new rules that would affect the Premier League, might be down in black and white. Hopefully you're now geared up in the proper manner to understand why these things are happening, and you can go and impart this wisdom into others. Guys, that's my one-on-one. We got to the end of it. They said write a script with 1,000 words. I wrote 3,000 words. We've been here for quite a long time, but I'm glad that I got all that stuff off my chest. But what would you like to see us talk about next? Let us know in the comments below. And as ever, don't forget to like and subscribe to Euro Football Daily. Go and check out all our other great content, or Pato's one-on-one before this, which is about expected goals. Done. We're out of here. Gone. Hard cut. So long.